everyone for hopping on this Blue Wolf University session. Today, Colin's going to take us through the Field Service Lightning overview. My name's Preston Adams. I'm on the Be Ready team. Really excited for what Colin has to share with us today. This is going to be our second installment. As always, this is going to be recorded, and I'll place it on the Blue Wolf University intranet page actually after this session. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Please put yourself on mute just to avoid any background noise, but feel free to unmute at any time, ask a question, get engaged, and reach out to Colin if you need anything. You can also use the chat box on the lower left-hand corner, and I can see that and let Colin know. And definitely, like I said, feel free to unmute and ask questions and engage to get the most out of the material. So that's all I have for you right now, and with that, I'll hand it over to Colin.
Thanks, Preston. Like Preston mentioned, feel free to speak up. We have a lot of content to cover, and I'm going to move quickly, but feel free to stop me and ask any questions, and then we should have a couple minutes for questions at the end as well. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Colin Lehman. I'm located in Raleigh. With the Solution Architect team. I've been with Blue Wolf for about 2 years. Some of my previous experience, studied electrical engineering and business management, and I've worked for both very big companies and also small companies, and I've done some individual technical consulting before Blue Wolf. And I've had experience as one of my jobs before Blue Wolf as in resource scheduling. So field services particularly kind of hits home for me because I've had first experience at doing this type of resource scheduling. So I know from experience a lot of the problems that go into scheduling, and particularly field service scheduling. My areas of expertise reside around Field Service Lightning and generally Service Cloud, and also Sightline and release management. And just some of the things I like to do in my free time, you can see over on the right, big adrenaline junkie, so anything that gets me outdoors and gets me moving, like skiing, scuba diving. My favorite thing is mountain biking right now. You can see me and my wife doing some mountain biking, and we both have a dog named Kona, who is a flat-coated retriever Irish setter mix, and she comes mountain biking and hiking and does all that kind of stuff with us as well. So the point of this course is we're going to be reviewing Field Service Lightning product and the capabilities of that product and some of the functionality around it. We're doing this to educate our Blue Wolf pack through live presentation and discussion, and I'll have one short recorded demonstration that I'll show you. We're hoping that as a result of this course that participants are going to better understand the capabilities of field service lightning and what it is, and know when to consider recommending field service to customers. So what we'll be talking about today is just a quick background on why field service is important as a product. And we'll talk about the user personas that are involved with the field service package. How do we license field service in Salesforce? What does the architecture and object model look like? And then some of the core features and functionality and the mobile functionality as well. So first, a quick background. Field service, and more particularly the scheduling aspect of field service, is very challenging. And the systems that we have today are mostly they're very inefficient. And when you look at the big entire picture of what goes in to scheduling, it's very costly as well. Most companies are using manual methods to schedule and manage their field service operations. They usually have siloed teams and processes, poor resource allocation. They might be disconnected from the CRM system, and they definitely have a lack of mobile support. On the flip side of that, almost all executives believe that they need to adapt their service models in order to keep up with the growing customer demand, today's customers' needs, because they're expecting more of a connected service experience from when they report an issue or demand service to when they receive that service in the field. So that's where Field Service Lightning comes in to help solve for some of those issues. And Field Service Lightning is going to provide you with an entire connected workforce between all of the personas that we're going to talk about shortly. It's going to also allow you to intelligently schedule and dispatch your work and do some of that automatically as well. And then also allow you to track and manage everything in real time, so you have real-time insight into all of your service operations. So when we look at who is a good fit and what type of scenarios are a good fit for field service, we'll talk about this more in detail in a second. But the sweet spots that we're looking for are really someone who already has Service Cloud installed. That's not necessary. We can certainly bring them up with Service Cloud, but it's just kind of a nice to have if they already have Service Cloud, because field service is actually just a layer on top of Service Cloud already. Field service really shines when you have one and done type scenarios versus multiple visits or larger teams, and those one and done visits really ideal if you have one person going out the site, or we'll talk about some other different scenarios where you have some smaller crews of people, or how do we deal with contractors as well. And the best verticals to focus on right now, where we have some really good use cases, you can see manufacturing, solar, healthcare, some of the business services where we have equipment maintenance. When you think of someone coming out to your home and doing maintenance or repair for security or delivery of appliances, for example, maybe some type of lawn care. Also telco, utilities, and insurance. For the utility side of things, that you got to be aware of the complex use cases there. The ones that really shine are in distribution, electrical distribution, for example, because that's where someone might be coming out to your home or somewhere else to connect power to a grid or do a disconnect or do some type of repair. So again, focusing on that one and done type scenario versus a larger project where it might be generation or transmission power based, and you have larger teams coming in over larger amounts periods of time to execute some type of larger scale project. So when we look at field service and kind of where it started back a year or two ago, and then kind of ramping up to where it is today, just as a quick background, back when field service started, Salesforce actually bought a company's solution, Click Software's Field Expert product. And over the course of this past about 2 years, they've been integrating that product with the Salesforce standard offering. So I show you this slide in two parts, because the first part is you can see in recent history how much innovation and features have been released. So there's been a lot of change in the product. So if you studied field service before, it's not necessarily the field service you've seen before. There's a lot of new additions to it. There's a lot of change to the way that it's architected, which brings me to the second point of how it's architected, because in this winter 17 release here, there was a major architecture change in how field service was deployed in a Salesforce environment. And the object model has shifted from more of a managed package to more of a standard object model within Salesforce. So if customers have installed field service before that time, they actually have to go through a data migration now to move all their data to those new standard objects eventually. So it's a good time to be moving the field service, because they're starting to finally push that architecture to more of a standard object offering within Salesforce. Some of the user personas that we'll be looking at are, first of all, your customer, then typically think about a customer calling in and then some type of service agent communicating with that customer and helping them log a case, seeing if they can troubleshoot the issue before they actually need the dispatch work. If they need the dispatch work, then that's where your dispatcher role comes in, because they'll be coordinating all the scheduling of that field service work. And then you have your field service technician who's actually performing the work. The customer, they want to be able to book service appointment from anywhere, anytime, and they want to have the right technician arrive on site with the right skills. From a service agent perspective, they want to have that complete view of the customer, so when they can call in, when the customer calls in, they can address their concerns appropriately, and they have the required visibility into their history and needs as well. You also want to be able to create a work order and schedule an appointment from a case. From a dispatcher side of things, they want to be able to optimize their job scheduling based off of the business rules that are applicable for them. They also need that real-time insight into service operations so that they can schedule and dispatch correctly. And from a field technician side, they need to be able to run all their service tasks on site from any device. So again, there's that mobile piece that comes in, and they need to access key information to complete that job quickly.
All right, thank you. I'll follow up with it.
There's two other scenarios when we kind of think of personas. They fall into two other kind of exception buckets. The first one is crews of people, and the second is contractor scenario. So typically in this scenario, where the field technician, the optimal scenario is our field technician is just a single person that we're assigning to a service appointment. But if we have multiple people or an external contractor that we need to assign, how do we deal with that, and what is supported from a field service package? From a crew's perspective, there's a couple different scenarios here. There's two that are very well supported, and that's your two-man crew and your team leader crew. Your two-man crew is you have two people that are going on the site. They may each arrive in their own truck, and they both are connected to the field service package. And each person, after that service appointment, they may go on to do other jobs independently. We can support that scenario. Another scenario is the team leader crew. So you can think of this as like a good example would be lawn maintenance, where you might have a team leader and a crew of other people under that leader. And it's just assumed that those helpers are always going to be moving and going to the same job as that team leader. So you actually only need to schedule that team leader. So that's supported as well. What's not supported right now and is currently set up as a roadmap functionality is a complex crew, where we know we need multiple people to be assigned to this service appointment. It's not necessarily straightforward which person has which skills, how many people we need. They might be coming from different locations. So typically see complex crews as part of utility type use cases. Maybe, remember we talked about distribution, someone coming out to your home to connect the power, disconnect the power, make a repair. That's not what we're talking about. When maybe in transmission or generation, when you have larger crews of people that are coming in from different locations and they have different skills, that's where we start to have a very complex scenario that's not very well supported right now in field service, but they are planning to support that in the future. From a contractor standpoint, all of these scenarios are supported by field service. The first one is a main contractor, so this is a very straightforward scenario. It's almost like it is like this person is working for your company 100% of the time, but they're just on contract employment terms. So this is ideal because you have 100% visibility into their schedule and availability. So when it's time to schedule, you have that full picture of when they are available. A contracting company is, the key here is you have that single point of contact that you're dealing with at that contracting company. So you might need to schedule that contracting company's resources, but when you reach out to that company, you're only dealing with a single point of contact, and there's some type of communication that goes on before you actually schedule for that company, and you make sure that they have resources that are available. The occasional contractor, it's supported, but it's challenging at the moment because you have partial visibility into this contractor schedule because they may be working for other companies as well. So when you go to schedule this occasional contractor in your system, you may assign something to them when it shows that they're available, but they're really not available because you don't have a full view of their schedule. So it's challenging more so from a business process standpoint because, again, there might need to be some preemptive communication before you actually assign some work to this contractor. So licensing, how do we get everyone licensed in the system so that can actually use field service? The way that we license it is through a combination of permission set licenses and permission sets. The licenses for field service, a list price right now is $150 a user per month. So it's not cheap. And one of the key points is that any resource that you need to schedule within Field Service Lightning, they need to be licensed. They need to have a field service license. So whether that is an internal employee, an external employee like a contractor, a resource, it doesn't necessarily need to be a human resource. It could be a non-human resource, some type of a shared asset like a truck, some type of a vehicle, some type of equipment, maybe even a classroom. These are things that would have certain skills associated with them. They might be located in a specific area, and you need to track their availability and assign them to certain appointments. So we can think of non-human resources as being a part of field service Lightning as well. However, any of those things, again, they need to have a license, or else you cannot schedule them in field service Lightning. And I list a couple of the flavors of the permission set licenses and the permission sets, and it just depends what your role is going to be in the system and what access that you need determines which permission set licenses that you assign to that person. And the other key point is since field service is a layer on top of Service Cloud, you don't need to assign a Service Cloud license and a field service license to people that are using field service if they're just using field service. You just need a single Service Cloud license in the org. So they aren't double licensed. There is some intention for some special licensing to be available in the future for contractors and partners. Again, everything on this slide is roadmap, so this does not exist today, but you can, if you're working on a field service project, you can reach out to the Salesforce account manager for that client, and they can work with you to basically mimic some similar pricing and functionality and tweak the licensing feature model and pricing to match what they're planning for in the future. Because if you have an external employee or a contractor or a partner who's only using the system part-time and they aren't being scheduled as much as an internal employee would be, it's kind of hard to justify the cost of paying for a full license for them just to be scheduled as part of the system. So they realize there's some restricted use that may happen with a contractor or partner type scenario. So that's why they're working on those types of licenses. Basically, the functionality that it's going to provide is what it's planned for. Is a contractor license would provide all of your field service functionality plus the functionality provided by a Customer Community Plus license. And similar for a partner license, it would be your field service licensing plus the functionality that's provided today by a partner community license. So what those licenses would allow you to do for those types of people would be to still dispatch and schedule them within the system. They would be able to self-schedule themselves as well, and they would be able to have access to field service mobile application so that they can manage all that from a mobile device as well. And you can see that the prices come down respectively, list price $50 and $75 for both of those. But again, all that is subject to change, and that's all roadmap plan functionality. So how is field service architected, and what does the object model look like? From an architecture standpoint, on the left in that big blue box is the Salesforce platform and all the standard objects that reside in that. Most of field service package has been transitioned onto the Salesforce platform directly in a standard object format. Before, everything was implemented via a managed package that you would install in Salesforce. You can see that Click Software is the company that's behind that field service managed package. There are still 2 managed packages that exist because there's still some functionality that's being driven that hasn't been integrated as standard functionality yet onto the platform. One of those managed packages is for more standard field service functionality and scheduling, and the other is specifically for mobile functionality. There's also mobile apps that reside as part of the platform. You have your Salesforce One application, and then that purple box is a new field service mobile application that it's a better UI, and it's a new app that your technicians can use to manage their work and provide feedback on the status and completion and access information for their service appointments that we'll talk about in detail a little bit later. You also have outside of this big blue box, outside of the Salesforce platform, you have an optimization engine that's still being run on Click Software servers. So when we schedule work, we may or may not be able to schedule all of our jobs, and it may or may not be the most efficient. It may not be the most efficient way to schedule that work. We can take a second step and send that scheduling out to this external optimization engine server. And then it crunches all of its logic, and then it spits back an optimized schedule that reduces inefficiencies in your scheduling, reduces travel time, saves cost, that type of thing. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. And then finally, Google API is external as well. This is how field service is doing a lot of its mapping visualization and also street level routing. So when we look at an object model, there are 2 main objects within the field service object model, and those are service appointment and service resource. So service appointment, it kind of holds all the details of when does this work, when is it due, when do I plan to arrive, what is my arrival window, who do I need to assign it to, where is the service located, what skills are required. And then your service resource is the actual person or asset that's being assigned to that service appointment. And that service resource, again, they would be located in a certain location or territory. They would have certain skills. So when we start playing the scheduling game, we're kind of matching up from the left side, where is it located, what skills are required to, okay, who has those skills, who is located, who is available. So when we look at what other objects are these things related to, some of the other standard objects, and these are all standard objects now as part of field service. We can relate service appointment to account, case, asset. There's 2 other standard objects that are part of Service Cloud that I'm not showing you that are called work order and work order line item. Those are pretty key in field service as well, work order line item, because those are containers for all the work that is happening. So typically what you do is you have a case come in, you create a work order, and then based off of how you define that work order, you would start assigning service appointments, would be a typical type scenario. You can see that your service resource relates to a Salesforce user record. Your user record is what is licensed as part of Salesforce, and then that gets associated to that service resource. So that helps with the licensing piece. So again, every resource that is active and needs to be scheduled as part of field service needs to be related to a user, and that user needs to be licensed with a service license. So service territory and operating hours, that helps us define where is the service happening, where is someone located, and you can have a hierarchy of service territories. So you can define this in really any way you want. A typical model might be define service territories at the country and then the state level and then maybe the city level. You could go down as far as defining at the zip code level, or it could be a little bit more abstract depending on your business, and you could define it as East New York, West New York, so it doesn't have to be actual locations. And then your operating hours are related to those service territories, and that's going to define the default working hours for that service territory for any particular week. So you could say 8 to 5 on Monday and 9 to 6 on Tuesday, and you define Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday if you want, and the operating hours is a container for all that.
I have one question here.
Sure.
Yeah, this relates to the core objects, the standard objects that you discussed earlier. I was expecting to see a contact relationship with the service appointment because when you have accounts where you have to deal with a contact in the field, right?
Yeah.
Then.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm not showing you every standard object. I'm not showing you every object that it relates to here. This is a very simple model, and I have a more detailed model that you can reference at the end that I'll show you as well. And I think that one displays a contact relationship. But you're correct that a contact relationship would exist on the service appointment because that pulls down some of the contact information from the customer side.
Got you. And more so than accounts, because account means the end users have an account relationship with the company. But it would, and I think more often you see contacts which are like if you have a cable company, right, and then you're dealing with the consumer. Then
exactly.
It's not
account would help specify which company called in and maybe where that service is happening. If that account they have a location in particular, and then you would also specify a contact on the service appointment. That would be a primary customer contact, for example.
Gotcha. And is there any relation to the person accounts here?
There could be, though I think more the standard way that you see it more oftentimes than not is not a person account, so just your standard account, and then relating a typical contact record to the service appointment. But you could use person accounts as well.
Gotcha. Yep. Thanks.
Thank you. One of the other major core objects is a skill. So like we mentioned, the service appointment, it's going to have required skills. So what do we need to complete that service appointment in terms of a skill requirement? And then your service resources, they're going to possess certain skills. So when we start to play the matching game, you can see that a service appointment will have skills, and we need to go look for a service resource with those skills. And the service appointment is also going to be located in a particular service territory. We want to try to find a service resource that is located in that service territory or is working in that service territory. And then the last thing is work type. And work type is really just a template for a type of work. And you can associate that to a work order or a work order line item or a service appointment. And that template for that work is going to hold a list of skills. It's also going to define a default duration for that type of work, and that's optional. And when you assign that work type to a service appointment and a work order line item, it's going to automatically pull down the required skills and the duration and set the due date accordingly based on that duration, and due date offset that you can define on the work type as well. So that's functionality that's out of the box, that it pulls those skills down from your template when you associate that to your service appointment or work order line item. So it's kind of a way of, if you can bucket the work that you're doing into certain types of work, and you find yourself doing the same type of work over and over again, that's a good way to use those templates to define that, so you don't have to associate those skills to your service appointments, work orders every time. You can just select a type of work. And one other thing, so service resources, how do we know their availability? They each have a personal calendar that they can manage. From a resource capacity standpoint, if they're a capacity-based resource, that's typically used with a contractor type resource. So you can define what capacity that resource would have in terms of how many hours can they work per day, how many hours can they work per week, or how many jobs can they handle per day, week, month, instead of looking at it from an hours perspective. And you can also define when that resource is going to be absent, whether they're on PTO, they need a break at this certain time. They can self-define that as well, so they are not scheduled when they're going to be absent out of the office, not available. So that was the core object model. And again, I have a more detailed object model that I'll share with you at the end for those of you who are particularly interested in the object model and how these things relate to one another. And all the red arrows in here, there's a junction object that sits in between the objects. So my more detailed object model will show that to you in explicit detail. Another side of the object model is, how do we actually do the scheduling? How do we define scheduling rules? Well, we have our service appointment, and then when we go to schedule that service appointment, we have an object called a scheduling policy. So we have these records, these scheduling policy records that we set up, and those are going to define how we go about, what logic we use to schedule. And the scheduling policies are defined by two other objects in the system. And those two other objects are work rules and service objectives. And the reason that there's two of these objects is because they help answer different questions. The work rules, they help answer the question of which resource can do the job. So this is a yes-no qualifier when we start looking at who is available, who is qualified to do the work that and fulfill the requirements that are defined on the service appointment. Some examples of that are, maybe I want to match the skills that are defined on the service appointment. I want to make sure that my resource is available. I want to make sure that they're in the right location. I want to match certain other fields. So the result of this is yes or no, that this resource can or cannot perform the work when we start looking at the resources that are available. The other side to that is service objectives, and that answers a different question. That answers the question of what resource is the best out of the resources that are available based on the work rules. So your work rules will qualify your resources. So if you have a pool of 1,000 resources, your work rules may help narrow that down to 5 resources for this particular service appointment. Now, out of those 5 resources, who is the best? The service objectives help answer that question. So maybe an example of a service objective would be to minimize overtime, minimize travel. You need someone as soon as possible. you have a preferred resource that you need for that service appointment. So those service objectives, when you associate those to the scheduling policy, you can have several service objectives, several work rules, but for the service objectives in particular, you can weight those on from a 1 to 10 scale. And they need to add up to 10. And those will help grade the resources, and it will return a result of on a 0 to 100 scale of who is the best candidate. So these are the candidates that are available, and here's the best is the result of all of this.
So is that service objectives sort of like a dynamic calculation, sort of like a formula based on their past interactions or feedback that they receive? So that means, somebody that has been 100% reliable or things like that, that had a good feedback would kind of get filtered down into the best candidate.
Yeah, there's a lot, I'll say, that comes out of the box, and you can tweak that, and you can create your own work rules and service objectives and scheduling policies. But to get really custom at this point, I'll say it's difficult to. It's very driven by the fields that you'll define declaratively. For any custom scheduling logic, it's not very straightforward to do that because the whole scheduling engine is part of the managed package right now. So there's still a lot of walls up around how that operates.
Gotcha. And now my question is that dynamic or is that static? Like that defined up front and, every time you would get the same result, or is that based on, service appointment results?
Yep. It's dynamic based off of the service appointment that you're looking at, because your service appointment is going to have different required skills. It's going to have different locations. So you kind of set the rules in your scheduling policy, and then it returns different results based off of the service appointment that it is scheduling for.
Gotcha. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so some of the core features and functionality. We've been talking about some of the core objects. So service appointment is one of those main objects. And the point of that is to track the need, the length, arrival window, planned versus actual appointment times. And your service appointment, that's what's actually being scheduled as part of field service. So you define your required skills for that service appointment, where it's located, and again, all that timing information. And then service resources, they get assigned to these service appointments. And there's this thing called a dispatcher console I'll show you in a second, and that uses service appointments as things that need to be scheduled. There's also a concept of inventory and part tracking. So if your technicians are out in the field and they are driving a van around and they have parts in their van, you can track the van stock, and you can associate those parts to your different service appointments so that you can make sure that your technicians have the parts that they need before they go out in the field. You can also generate and send service reports from a service appointment. The other main object is the service resource object. And the point of that is you're defining everything around your service resource, that person or that shared asset. It defines when, where, for what, and whom, and how much. So for where, your resources get assigned to that service territories. And you can see right here is an example. You could be related to multiple service territories. So here's an example of they've defined their service territory as Bay Area or wine country. So clearly we're out in California here. And they have a primary service territory and also a secondary service territory. And then you can have start and end dates with those service territories as well. So you can have primary, secondary. You can also have a relocation territory if someone's doing a temporary reassignment in a particular service territory. That helps define where that service resource is able to do work. When they're able to do work, if you remember, there was an operating hours attached to the service territory object when I just showed it to you. that operating hours helps define when work is able to be done in that service territory. You can, when you associate a service resource to this service territory, by default it pulls in the operating hours from that service territory. You have a way to override that and say, no, I actually want this person working these hours in that service territory. So you can define custom availability for a resource, and you can also define when they'll be absent. You can see down here, I have an example of a related list, when they'll be absent for vacation, a meeting, some other type of thing. And then for what and for whom, I don't show it here, but again, think of another related list on this service resource record that would be skills, and you would have a whole list of what their skills are and what level of skill they would be, and you can have certain skills associated to a resource for a certain period of time, so a start and end date if it's more like a certification type based skill. You can also define a resource preference on a work order. So you can say, I have to have this resource work on this work order, or I cannot have this resource work on this work order, and you can do a similar thing on the account. So if a customer has a resource preference, whether that's one of your individual resources or a contracting company, you can define all of that at the account level as well and pull that down. And then how much, that would be defined here as a capacity. There's two major differentiators for the field service product, and one of those is the scheduling aspect, and the other is the optimization aspect. This is really where Salesforce bought up this technology, because it's very difficult to recreate, and there's a lot of proprietary technology involved in the whole scheduling aspect of this that no other player in the market really has with as much advanced capability as this product has. And a lot of the other players require a lot of custom work and a lot of custom implementation to get, and even 50% of where you would have out of the box with this product. So a lot of how this product is implemented is very declarative as well, which is nice. What you get with Smart Scheduling is truth-based appointment booking. So it has that real-time intelligence into your service operations. So you know exactly when someone is available and when you can schedule, again, depending on your use case and what type of people you're dealing with, contractors, for example. You can use the scheduling engine to automatically assign appointments to the right technician based on a combination of different things: time, skills, location, your custom business rules. You can also allow customers to self-book their own appointments by exposing the work order line item and service appointment objects in a community. This is the dispatcher console I mentioned before. So this is similar to, you can kind of think of like a service console or any type of console that we've seen before, but this one is specific to field service. So over here on the left would be a list of all your service appointments that you would have, that you've filtered on. And then over here would be either a Gantt view of those service appointments and who they're assigned to, how long those service appointments are, when people are on break or PTO. And then you can flip this view and you can look at it on a map view as well. And then here is where you'll be selecting the scheduling policy for how you want the scheduling logic, which scheduling logic you want to use when you start scheduling. And then you would apply that logic down here to your service appointments when you actually start scheduling. So here, this provides a complete view of all of your field operations. You can easily customize this view, and again, you have that map or Gantt view. And this is a really easy way to manage and monitor both your resources and your service appointments. The other major differentiator is that intelligent optimization. So here's where we're able to take everything that we've scheduled so far and push it out to that optimization engine server and have it further optimize that schedule and push back results so that we can maximize resource utilization, we can resolve inefficiencies in our schedule, and it automatically helps improve that schedule by reducing the amount of travel time, for instance, and maybe who it's assigned to. And we can either manually trigger, we can manually select to run this optimization whenever we want, or we can have this optimization set up in the background on a recurring schedule to run every night, or we could have it even run within the same day automatically, so that for certain service appointments at certain statuses, we could have those automatically reassigned to optimize the schedule. For example, if someone is running long on a service appointment and can't make the next one, we can have that schedule kind of dynamically change throughout the day automatically, which is nice. So now I wanted to show you a quick demo of this, what it would look like in this dispatcher console, what the scheduling would actually look like, and what it would look like if we actually optimized that schedule.
Smart scheduling definitely brings value and cost savings to your field service organization. But with Field Service Lightning's optimization services, you can multiply those savings and take your field service performance to a whole new level. Let's consider the following scenario where the dispatcher has 56 new work orders to schedule. She selects them all and triggers the smart scheduling process. This process sorts the work orders by priority and then schedules them one by one, finding the best candidate for each while adhering to all scheduling rules and objectives within our service policy. After a few seconds, we can see the scheduling GAN quickly filled up with services. This would have taken a long time to do manually, and the dispatcher can go on to dispatch the work. In this case, we were able to schedule 50 out of the 56 jobs with an average of 24 minutes travel per job and using up 66% of our allowed overtime. Now the dispatcher will invoke the Field Service Lightning optimization service. She specifies the relevant dates and locations and selects to optimize all work orders. The optimization request is sent, and the dispatcher can continue to work while noticing that something is happening in the background. The optimization service looks at the entire day and creates a wide range of improvements to the existing schedule, always measuring the outcome according to the same business logic. In this demonstration, the optimization request was invoked manually. Field Service Lightning allows you to configure the service to run every night, crunching away and optimizing thousands of work orders so that your field service techs are presented with an optimized schedule when they arrive the next morning. You can even set it up to run in-day, always on the lookout to improve the existing schedule. The result is incredible, and the daily routes now look really optimized. This time, we were able to schedule all 56 jobs and drastically reduce travel to 15 minutes per job using only 33% of the overtime. For companies with over 100 service technicians, this could translate into millions in yearly savings.
Okay, so that was a quick demo of what it would actually look like in the dispatcher console for the system to go ahead and automatically schedule all of the service appointments and also to optimize that schedule as well. And you can see that we scheduled most of our service appointments just using the scheduling engine, but then we actually weren't able to schedule all of them. So when we passed our scheduling over to the optimization engine, it was able to optimize our schedule, reduce efficiencies, and be able to schedule everything.
In terms of, when the engine optimized them and before they optimized when you assign them, they haven't gone to the field technicians yet, right? I mean, they're still before dispatch kind of scheduling?
Yep,
right?
Correct. So typically there's more of a private data model for the service appointments, and then certain statuses will trigger visibility to the service technicians. So
okay.
Typically, that first pass of scheduling, it happens before that technician has visibility to that service appointment.
Yep. Okay.
Yep. Okay, we got a couple minutes left. I want to run through mobile real quick, and then we might have time for one or two questions. There's a new field service mobile app that is available on iPhone right now. It got released back in February, so just recently. Android application is expected in Q2, Q3 of this year. Again, all that is safe harbor. It's expected. They are working on it though, but this one is expected right now. One thing to note: this field service mobile app, it is not the same thing as Salesforce One. It is a separate mobile application, and it's geared toward specifically field service use. It optimizes the user interface to better manage and work with the service appointment, work order, and work order line item objects. It's also built to be offline first. You can reference knowledge articles. You can manage all your inventory and parts. You can manage your resource absences right from the app. You'll receive push notifications for certain things, capture customer signature, and generate service reports. And there's also ways to brand the mobile app as well. So I'm going to talk about some of those in a little bit more detail right now and give you some screenshots. First of all, the offline capability of the app. This comes out of the box. So those main objects at the top there, service appointments, work orders, work order line items, and assets, all of those and the related objects off of those primary field service objects, they get primed onto your device based off of a window that you define. So if you want to prime data for the next 2 or 3 service appointments that are upcoming, and this is a sliding window throughout the day, the mobile device is going to start pulling the data down for all of that information that we list to the left of the phone, for all of those objects and related objects, knowledge articles, page layouts, and even actions within that are on those objects so that we can actually interact with the records. And then we're able to operate entirely offline, and then we'll sync everything back to the server when we have a connection. So a little bit more on that. Any action that you do actually gets passed to this offline queue first without the assumption that you have network access. And then if you do have network access, it goes ahead and it uploads those changes automatically. You can also manually upload changes. So you can see the green and red button, upload or undo. So you have the action to undo something as well if it hasn't uploaded yet. And then you also receive on the very right there validation errors back, and you can correct for those changes. So you don't lose your changes, and you can edit those to resolve those validation errors before they get sent back to the server as well another time. When you open the app, this is what you see if you have the right licensing. And I have to say, if you go out and you download the app right now and you try to log in and you try to use it, it's going to throw a lot of errors because you need to be licensed as a field service user, and specifically on a mobile device, mobile licensing for you to even use the app. So it's going to be a pretty useless application for you unless you're actually licensed and working out of some type of an org where you have a user that is licensed. So if you are, then when you log in and you have service appointments that are assigned to you, this is kind of what you see in the list view kind of format. You'll see your overview for the day of all your service appointments, and then at the top there on the very right, you can select which day that you want to look at. You can also switch to a map view. So again, this is just displaying the same type of data on that list view. So I'm looking at it for the day, what my service appointments are, when they're happening, where they're located, and this shows it to me in more of a better visualization type of way because I can see kind of where I need to go. And if I tap into any one of those, you can see that it does street level routing, does time to arrival, and then I can open driving directions in Google Maps, Apple Maps, Waze, or I can just copy the address that I need to go to my clipboard so I can use it in the application of my choice. Some of the quick actions that come out of the box, so this is dependent on the object that you're pulling the quick actions up from, but for example, for a work order, there's 3 hard-coded actions. There's service report, edit, and open in Salesforce One. All the other quick actions, they're based off of the page layout that you would define normally in Salesforce. But the ones, the quick actions, they're limited in field service to only actions that are of the type of create and update. For knowledge, this is one of the things that gets primed as well, so this is really nice. When you're looking at a work order, you can see knowledge articles that are related. One thing to note, that you can only relate those knowledge articles to a work order or a work order line item record for now, not necessarily directly to the service appointment. But you can pull those knowledge articles up and review those, and that's really important for a lot of techs, not only for something that they're familiar with, but some techs are doing that job for the first time, so it's necessary to have those instructions and installation or repair steps accessible to them on the mobile device while they're out in the field. Inventory, so parts. How do we deal with parts? You can see all that from the mobile device as well, what parts are required for the job, what parts you have in stock at various locations, including your van or your truck that you're driving around. And then if you're out of a part, then you can go ahead and there's a process that it walks you through for ordering that part and where you want it delivered, either to the customer site, to yourself, and all that flow that it walks you through to do that, it's actually offline supported as well. So offline flow is supported in this Field Service Lightning app, which is kind of neat. There's a barcode scanner feature. So any text field that's within the app, there's a little button that looks like a barcode that will pop up when you go to edit that text field. So if you tap on that barcode button, then it'll bring up this barcode feature. You can scan barcodes, and then you would tap the result of that barcode reading to add that barcode back into your text field. Resource absences, you can manage your resource absences. So you don't make sure that you aren't scheduled for work when you're going to be absent. So this is a good feedback mechanism to your dispatchers. And you can also take into account your resource absences automatically in your scheduling logic. Push notifications, there's certain scenarios where you'll receive a push notification on your phone. And it's assumed right now that the technician who's logged in and is getting these notifications, that they're the owner or the assigned resource on the record for which they're receiving these notifications. And they'll receive some type of notification when either a chatter post happens on a work order or a work order line item, when there's a field that's being tracked that gets changed, or the assignment changes for that service appointment to or away from the user. So if someone is assigned to a service appointment and they get removed from that, or they get assigned to a new service appointment, they'll get a push notification for those scenarios. Service reports, this is a neat one because you can do this all from a mobile device as well. So once a service tech is done with work, they can acquire a customer signature right from their phone, click a button, generate a service report, and send that to the customer all within a couple seconds. You can define different templates for your service reports, similar to how you would for quoting. They're still building out how you define those templates, so that's kind of half-baked right now. Another key point is that the service reports, when you go to generate those, that is not offline capable right now. You need an internet connection to generate those service reports, because that's all being done on a server right now. That's not baked into the Field Service Lightning app yet, but it will be in the future. And final thing is branding. So you have a way to change certain things about the app. Out of the box, it comes with a dark theme, so this might be useful for technicians who are working in low light conditions, but you can change most of the coloring scheme within the app. You just can't change the application icon or the splash screen that appears when you're loading the app. That's all that I have for now. Some additional resources. Definitely check out these groups, these partner groups. And also there's some very good documentation that's out there that's referenced in those groups, and there's videos and webinars in those groups, so definitely check those out. And for those of you who are interested, here's that detailed object model. So these slides will be sent out, so you can reference this. Notice that contact is over here as one of those standard objects that connects to a work order and down through your service appointment. And then if you're interested in more of the detail around what object gets primed and loaded onto a mobile device automatically, this kind of explains that a little bit better. And this slide also helps explain what data actually gets primed on the mobile device and is going to be ready and accessible for offline access. That's all I had. I know we're at time, but I'm okay to stay on a few extra minutes if we can take a few questions.
Yeah. I have one question. I don't know, and I've been asking several, but I want to give an opportunity to others if they want to. Otherwise, sure. I have one. Sure. ServiceNow was a very popular field service app, and then Salesforce came out with this. So how do you compare, contrast? Maybe touch on major differences between ServiceNow and this.
Yeah, there's a lot of other field service solutions that are on the market. ServiceNow was one of them. ServiceMax was another one. The biggest differentiator and where these guys are really standing out compared to the other guys is with the whole scheduling logic. Scheduling and optimization, these guys are just way more advanced, and the results that they're returning, it's that proprietary technology that they have for the way that they do their scheduling and optimization, no one else is really doing that and being able to automatically do that. And the second thing is a lot of the way that you set up field service, it's very declarative. There's not a lot of custom that needs to happen. So those two things alone is where this solution is really set apart.
Gotcha. And then in terms of pricing, how are those priced versus this?
Compared to the other guys, I'm not sure what the other guys' pricing is, but you know what the pricing is here, at least list price. And I will say that the service account managers that you'll deal with always, when you're working on an actual project, they'll work with you to reduce the price. You probably won't pay list price because they're more times than not you'll be dealing with a lot of licenses for either internal contractors that you'll be dealing with. So typically on the scale of thousands of licenses that you're dealing with, so there's usually some discounting that goes on.
Yep. Thanks a lot. Yeah, that helps.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Great demo, by the way. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no one else, I'll still stay on for a minute, but Preston, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah. Thanks again, Colin, for taking the time to inform the pack. If anybody has questions, feel free to reach out to Colin afterwards. I'll also be sending out these slides to each one of you, so you have that and you can kind of go through them at your own leisure. And as always, this is going to be recorded, and I'll place it on the internet page, so feel free to check that out if you need to go back through or let somebody know about that. And next week we have the deep dive for Field Service Lightning, so make sure you're registered for that. And I look forward to seeing you guys on future sessions.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.